Hello and welcome to the third installment in the boss fight course, where we use state trees and AIs to create our boss, and we go through everything in lots of detail. In today's episode, we're going to make another state for the melee attack. As you can see, I've completed everything what we're going to do today. We create another state for the melee attack where we learn how to use an interface to go to the boss reference. In the last episode, we did this using casting. Today, we're going to look at how we use an interface to do the same thing. We're going to play a function on the boss. We're going to make this whole melee attack with animations and sphere traces to do damage. What that looks like is this: the boss is going to keep chasing us, he's going to run after us. If he gets to us, he's going to swing at us. These sphere traces is how he's going to damage us. We've added some extra logic to make sure, even though we've got loads and loads of sphere traces, he's not going to damage us multiple times. We've set that up. We've also made sure he's doing sphere traces around his hand, not just basic ones around his body. We do them at a certain location multiple times, so it's very realistic and it follows the path of his swing. He looks at us whilst he's attacking. As you can see, he's not just attacking into the air, he's looking at us, which is realistic. And after his attacks, he's going to go back to chasing us. So now we're starting to get an actual enemy behavior. This isn't a completed boss fight, but this is certainly where we're starting to get into actual enemy AI behavior. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so we want to now add attacks to our boss. We want to say that when our boss catches up to our player, right, he's chasing, he gets to our player here, instead of just constantly switching between chase and idle, we need to now make a third state, a melee attack state, that the boss is going to go to, where he can throw a melee attack and attack us, and then after that decide what state to go to next. So yeah, we need another state for our melee attacks. So obviously, we're going to go to our st_boss for our state tree. We're going to click add state and call this melee attack. Now, if you remember from the last episode when we first looked at state trees, every state rather, has a transition. And by default, it goes back to the root. So the transition is just where do we go after the state has ended. And if you don't specify a transition, if you don't specify, okay, go to this state when it's succeeded, go to this state when it's failed, like we've done for idle, we've said go to chase state when succeeded, go to root when failed. If you don't specify that, we always go back to root. So on our chase state, we're immediately just going to go back to root. This melee attack state is never going to be accessed because we never have a position where we go to it. Just because the state's there doesn't mean it's going to be used. That's the beauty and sometimes inconvenience of state trees. You have to specify where to go when. So for our chase state, we need to think when and why would we want to go to our melee attack. Well, if the chase succeeds, then we want to go to our melee attack, because when the chase succeeds, we know we've got to the player. If we take a look at what our chase actually does, we can see when chase success is fired, we finish task with succeeded as true. When chase event fail fires, we finish task with success as false. So we can know from this code, in our state tree, if we make a transition which says on state succeeded, which is fired here, that we can now go to melee attack. So if we go to our chase state, if we, do our, if we catch up to the player, then we will go to our melee attack state, we'll fire our melee attack, and that's really cool. That's exactly what we want. So we can leave this as that. Now you'll see that the root, it's automatically filled this in. It says like if it's failed, go back to root. It will always provide the root transition if you haven't filled in all the current ones. If I make one and just say on state completed, here you can see if we change this to on state failed, go to root, the icon looks slightly different. It's like the straight line arrow rather than the backwards looking one. To be honest, that's not really an important detail. I just thought I'd mention it in case you were wondering. If you don't explicitly say go back to root, it does. So if we got rid of these two transitions, it would go back to root. Now, we don't want to just make our melee attack in a task itself. We want to make all the functionality on the boss, and then pull this back into the task, exactly like we did for chase. When we did the chase one, I showed you how to do it through casting, because I think it's important, even if you don't want to do it, that you understand how it works, because you have to understand what's happening to understand, I guess, why it's bad. A lot of people will say casting's bad, but why is it bad? You know, have you ever thought that, like, well, why shouldn't we do it? And a lot of the times it's really not that big of a deal. I think people sometimes like to exaggerate. But yeah, last time we looked at how to do this through casting. In today's episode, I'll show you how to do this through interfaces, just so you know both ways. Interfaces are better because when you cast to something, so when we cast to the base boss here, we have to load the entirety of the base boss variable just to get one event, whereas if we use an interface, we only have to load that one specific event. So it is cheaper in terms of computational resources, and it does run quicker. It's not the end of the world, to be honest. If you used a bunch of casting, you might not even notice it. But if you were wanting to make a commercial project on a large scale in a very big game, or just in a professional environment, then you would want to start using casting. Start using interfaces and stop using casting, because I guess it is just more professional. So I guess before we can do that, we need to actually make the task that we can use an interface to. So go into here, click state tree task blueprint base. I have one there called melee attack already, because I was just checking something before I came here, so I'm just going to delete that. I'll go to melee attack, browse to asset, delete. I like to make sure everything's in order before I start, and I guess I just forgot to delete that. But yeah, I'll do it again so I can show you all the steps we go through. So we're going to click new task, state tree task blueprint base, go into the task folder and call this stt underscore melee attack. Cool. First things first, I just want to add this task to the state so it's there and we don't forget it. So add stt melee attack. Now, this is quite a useful, quite a common little, not trick, but just feature thing we do. And we did it in the last episode, and I want to test you and see if you can remember how to do it. We want to get a reference to our boss from the state tree task to this task. You know, using a variable. How can we do that? You know, we want to call a function on the boss from the task. How do we do that? I want you to take a second or two, see if you can do it by yourself. You know, just pause the video, think about it, try it. Unpause when you're ready for me to tell you how we're going to get a reference to the boss inside this task, so we can then use it to call functions from the boss and event dispatches, etc. Okay, so I hope you've tried to do that, because it's very important you try these things, because that's how you learn and remember things. I'm going to give you the answer now. What we're going to do is we're going to make a variable. I'm just going to call this boss of type actor. This is what we did in the last episode, of type actor, because we also need to make it instance editable and expose on spawn. I'll say what that does in just a second, because inside our state tree, we have access to this global context, and this global context is an actor. It doesn't specifically have to be a base boss. This is an actor variable. It isn't of type BP underscore base boss. We're not setting this variable to be BP underscore base boss, because it isn't a base boss. It's just an actor. This could be anything. Now we know it is going to be a base boss because it's coming from our boss, but it doesn't have to be. We could apply this state tree to our player. We could apply it to a turret. We could apply it to a tree, and then it would fill in that actor context appropriately. So we don't specifically know we're taking in a BP base boss, so we're leaving it as actor. Yeah, and this context can bind to this actor to fill in that variable. Cool. And the reason we can see this variable here is because we set it to be instance editable and expose on spawn. If we unchecked those boxes, we wouldn't see the variable here. We can only see the variable because we set those two states to be active. And we can also make our own global parameters. We're not going to do it right now because in a future video I've planned to cover it when we make how to use an EQS to find a location and then move to that location. But I'll give a brief overview of what a custom parameter does. You can make a parameter, it's just a variable, you can choose the type. We're going to eventually make a vector one, and you can bind this to the result of one task, store it in this property, and then you can use that in another task on another state. So, you know, custom made parameters are really cool. But yeah, that's for slightly later in the course. So yeah, don't worry about that for now. What we're going to do is we're going to, you know, actually define this melee attack task functionality. So as usual, we're going to go to functions, override, and click on enter state. We're pretty much always going to use enter state. You don't really need the other ones. I mean, there are situations where you might want to use them, but you really don't need them. These are the ones we're going to keep using. I did explain in, I think, the first or maybe the second episode in what the other ones do. Okay, so event enter state. We want to get our boss, and I'm going to convert this to a validated get, which just means check that this thing exists in the world. Now, do you remember in the last episode when we used interfaces? Okay, I explained what interfaces were. I said how they're like a contract to a new function. You declare the function, and you're essentially promising that, you know, this other function exists. So before we got our attack target, but I think what we could do to avoid casting, you know how we said casting wasn't optimal. It's not bad. A lot of people say casting is bad. It's not bad. It's just not optimal. That's what I think. So instead of casting, we could make a new function, and we could call it get boss ref for reference. And we could give this an output, make it an output function, and it's going to return our boss. So I'm just going to call this boss, and I'm going to make it of type BP underscore base boss. Compile that and save that. So now we've declared a new function that is called get boss reference, and it has an output of base boss. Now this function in itself doesn't do anything. All it is, it's a promise that we're going to eventually have a function that does it. This just allows us to reference that function in multiple places. We are able to use this because it's in this interface. You know, we can use it straight away. We can come here and we can say get boss ref. We don't have to wait until we've implemented the functionality inside our base boss before we can use it. And that's why interfaces are really cool, because that means you can have the same function implemented in a different way on loads of different characters. You know, on one boss you could have the same interface, but you could just change what the function actually does. It's called the same thing, has the same inputs and outputs, but does something else. And you know, sometimes that can be extremely useful. So we're going to go to our base boss. So just find that in our folders, go to blueprints, base boss, open this up. And in our interfaces, you'll see we've got a new function that's just appeared. The grayed out functions tell you that it's an output function. Sometimes you'll have a function that has this key symbol. So I think it's a key. It's not actually a key. It's like a gear and an arrow, but I don't know. I just think it's a key. And it'll be golden or like a yellow color. That means it's a function that actually, I guess, not really necessarily an input function, but just it calls to a custom event. And we'll see how that works a little bit later. But if you open this get boss reference function, we can just plug in a reference to self. So if we search for self, we get a self reference, plug it into the output of this event, of this function. So now in our melee attack task, off this boss reference, if we drag out and we say get boss ref, we've now gotten a reference to our boss through an interface, which I guess avoids casting, which a lot of people say is bad. It's just suboptimal. And now off this boss reference, we can call functions that are on the boss. We can call event dispatchers that are on the boss. So we can now go to our boss and we can, you know, make a bunch of logic down here to do the attack, and we can call that from the task, then we can make an event dispatcher to tell us when the task is finished, and then we can use that to end the task. That's what we're going to do right now. So yes, let's go to our base boss and let's make a new custom event. Make a new custom event and call this melee attack. The melee attacks, and in fact all of the attacks that I'm going to do in this system, are animation driven attacks. That means that your attack essentially is just playing an animation, and at various points in the animation we might attach small pieces of logic to do something. You know, maybe it's a sphere trace, and if something's in that trace, do some damage. Maybe you just want to launch a projectile, do something, but the crux of the system is just an animation. So we now need some animations for melee attacks. Now, in my system, I'm going to use 3 different attacks. I'm going to store 3 different melee attacks. They're all going to be pretty simple, just like swings of the hand or something, and they're going to do damage. So we're going to make a variable, and we're going to call it melee attacks. It's going to be of type anim montage, and it's going to be an array. We're going to make this an array because we're going to store 3 animation montages here, and we're just going to pick a random one every time we want to do something, so it's not the exact same attack every single time. They're all going to be basic attacks, so they're all going to be quite similar and simple, but they're just slightly different, so it doesn't look like the boss is doing the exact same thing every time. And to make these attacks, we've got everything we need with the Paragon Rampage animation imports. So if we go to Paragon Rampage, click on the characters folder, go to Heroes, then go to Rampage, go to Animations. We've got all these really cool animations here, and I'm going to tell you which ones we're going to use for the attacks. The first one we're going to use is attack_melee_B. So I'm simply going to search this up so I don't have to look through everything. So attack_melee_B. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to scroll up, I'm going to say, I'm going to go to the create tab and create anim montage. I'm going to say an_base attack 1. That's disappeared because we're searching for attack_melee, which isn't that. So if we go back to here, we can see it now, base attack 1. And the difference between an animation montage and an animation sequence is if we go into an animation sequence, I'll just open this one, we've simply got the animation. There's not much we can do with the animation really, except for just play the animation. But in an animation montage, we can attach extra things to the animation. So if I go into the animation montage, we have these extra tracks, we have notifies, and actually another thing we can do is we can change the play rate of the animation. So we can change this to, you know, if we wanted 0.25 or maybe 0.75. I'm going to leave this at 0.75. Oh, it's not updated. 0.75. I find it's a bit better when he goes a little bit slower because I don't like how he moves super fast. All right, he's a big boss. He's supposed to be a bruiser, goes slow, does a lot of damage, that sort of thing. You can change the start time and the end time. So if you move this higher up, he starts like quicker in the animation, like during the swing, but we're just going to leave that at 1. And what I'm really interested in is these notifies. So I'll just put this up here. In a notify, we can call an event from outside the montage, from inside the montage. So in our base boss, we're going to set this up. After the setup, I'll explain it a little bit more, then it should make a lot more sense if it's a little bit confusing. As of right now, we're going to drag off here and we're going to say play montage. Play montage. Now this function plays an animation montage. It won't play an animation sequence. It won't play these green ones. It just plays these bluey purple ones. So we're going to go into here and we're going to go for an_base attack 1. And in the skeletal mesh, we're just going to plug in the mesh for our character. All these extra inputs, you know, the play rate, the starting position, that's fine. We can adjust that from the animation montage itself if we wanted to. If I just click on this track right there. we should also move this to its own function. So if I go to boss animations, yeah, that's where I'm going to move it to. So we're going to take this animation montage, just drag it, disappeared, drag it into animations, move here, cool. Make a new folder, call it animation montages, and just put it in there for a bit of extra organization. So, all right, this is the crucial point. This next part is really important to understand, and it's kind of the crux of how the whole attack system works. So, in our animation montage, we can create a notify. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to create a notify. For now, we'll just go in the basic montage notifies because that just sets the base events up. And I'm going to go on this notify. Right now it says none. That none, that's just the name of the notify. Simply the name. And we can change this name. Let's just call it attack. We'll change it a little bit later because we actually don't want one specific attack, but two in the montage, and we attack in between the notifies, but for now we'll just go with one. So we have this notify name for attack, and inside our base boss, when we play a montage, we have this notify name pin, and we have this notify begin and notify end. So every time any notify begins, this will fire, and we can check if that notify has a specific name. So we can say switch on name on top of on notify begin. So that just means whenever any montage notify starts, we can check if the notify is called attack. Now make sure that you've spelled attack correctly. It's case sensitive. I've got rid of it has default pin just because I don't think I want it. It has default pin just means if none of them have the name, it will fire that one. So we are checking, does that notify have the name attack? This one does. So when we hit this part in the animation, what's going on there? When we hit this part in the animation, his hands in the air, this event is going to fire. We know this attack has fired when he gets to this part, and the whole idea is, for example, you get to here, you want to attack, and then you might do a sphere trace, check if there's anything in the sphere trace, so the area you want to check around your hand, for example, and then if there is, you do damage to that thing. So on the base boss, switch on name, attack. That is really important to understand. If you don't understand how that works, you need to rewatch that last section. It's really important to understand why we're using this notify and that we're switching on this attack. Before we complete that attack, we should add a couple extra pieces of setup before we play the montage, because we don't just want to play the montage, we also want to set focus of the boss. And setting focus just means looking at something. So if we get the AI controller, so get AI controller, in control actor we'll just plug in self. And off of this, if we say set focus, okay, so there's two functions here. There's set focal point and there's set focus. Set focus is if you want to set your focus to an actor, if you want to start looking at an actor, and set focal point is if you want to start looking at a vector position, if you just want to look at a location. We need to set focus because we want to look at the attack targets. We'll get the attack target and plug it into this new focus. So that just means whenever we do an attack, we're just going to make sure that we're actually looking at the player. Otherwise, we might be doing an attack and the player could run to the side and it looks like he's swinging into nothing. So yeah, it just makes it a little bit more realistic. And before we actually do an attack, we just want to make sure that we're not dead. Pretty simple. So we're going to get is dead, and we're going to say not boolean, and we're going to do a branch. So this is only going to fire. We're only going to go to the true execution pin of the branch node if our boss is not dead, because if the boss is dead, for example, if the boss has just died when we've just got to the attack state, we don't want to fire this attack because we don't want to do damage or anything. We could have some weird undefined behavior. So yeah, make sure we're not attacking or trying to attack if we're dead. We're also going to make a new variable called attacking. it's going to be a Boolean variable. We're gonna have to change this back to single. We don't want an array. We're gonna set this, and we're just gonna set it to true, just so we can have a variable tracking the state of whether we're attacking or not. Very, very cool. So as we said, we want to have 3 different melee attacks, and we pick one at random and play one of them. All 3 of these basic melee animations, they're all going to have a notify with the same name. So we don't have to worry about this notify name and switch on name, because they're all going to have the same name. So we can get this melee attack. We can say get random, or just search for random array item. Plug that into montage. For now, we haven't actually specified any, but we will go and add those. Compile save, melee attacks, we're going to add 1. We're going to go to an_base attack 1. And let's go make the other 2 attack anim montages. So let's go back to content, go to Paragon Rampage, characters, heroes, rampage, animations, search for attack _melee _c, right click on it, click on create, anim montage, an_base, capital B _base attack 2. And the third one we want is attack underscore, it's not searching, attack underscore biped underscore melee underscore B. So right click on that, create, go to create, anim montage, call it an_base attack, not 2, 3, base attack 3, and we're just going to move these 2 anim montages to our animation montages folder in our animations folder on AI. And now we've got 3 anim montages. We've got an_base attack 1, 2, and 3 for our 3 different melee base attacks. We've got them all here, so we can go back to our array of anim montages for our melee attacks, add 2 more items, and just fill those in for base attack 2 and base attack 3. So now the idea is, whenever this function fires, we're going to pick one of those 3 montages at random, we're going to play them, and we are just, waiting to see if those montages happen to have a montage that has the name attack. Now, I want to vary that slightly. I don't want to just say, do we have one called attack? I want to have attack start and attack end, because what I'm going to do, which is a lot more realistic than just one sphere trace, is I want to have 2 points in time, and between those points in time, every 0.01 second, so pretty much constantly, we're going to do a sphere trace so we can constantly check if we have something. So when the boss swings his arm, there's going to be like a series of spheres around his arm that are moving, and if anything happens to be within one of those spheres, it gets damaged, and we make sure that we keep a list of the things that have been damaged within that current attack cycle to make sure we don't damage the same thing like 10 times. So we're going to go to our an_base attack 1, and one thing I should also mention is we're going to do the sphere trace around his hands. And it's very easy to do, actually. You think that seems like really simple and obvious, and it kind of is. We want, he's punching, he's swinging his hand, so we're going to do it around his hand. We're not just going to do it around the boss. And if we go to our base boss, if we go to the mesh, if we go to the parent sockets, we actually have a socket for the hand already. If we double click on the skeletal mesh asset, we can see that those are the feet. I'll just search for it. So hand hand_r. There is already a bone called hand_r, and we can attach an arrow to his hand. Then we can get the arrow's position in the world and do sphere traces around those arrows. That's a cool little thing I think is really interesting, really useful. So All right, step one, we look at the montage and we see which hand is the boss swinging with. He's swinging with his right hand, so we need to find where do we want to start the attack and where do we want to end the attack. I think we should start tracing around here, because that's sort of when he's starting his actual swing, and we should end it around here, because that's when he's on the ground. So I'm going to right click on this spot, I'm going to click add notify, montage notify, and I'm going to go to the first one, and I'm going to call this R with a capital R, start with a capital S. Then I'm going to go to the second notify, I'm going to call this R with a capital R and stop with a capital S. I mentioned capitals because this is case sensitive. If you do R with a lowercase and then R with an uppercase on the switch, it will not work. So be very careful that these are exactly the same as what we're going to use inside the switch case. So if we go back to our base boss, on this switch name, we want to say R start and R stop. Make sure they're definitely the same. They are. Compile, save. So now when we hit this start, we're going to start tracing spheres. When we hit this stop, we're going to stop tracing spheres. So stop the check for things we can damage, essentially. Now let's go to our mesh and let's find, let's make arrows around his hands so we can reference those. You know how I said there was a bone on his hand? There is a bone that is called hand underscore R, but within the event graph, you can't, or at least you can't easily reference that exact bone position. So what I like to do is I like to create an arrow, in fact 2 arrows, one for each hand. So press on components and just make an arrow, make sure it's attached to the mesh. I'll call this right hand arrow. We'll make a second one, we'll duplicate this and just call it left hand arrow, and we can attach the left hand arrow to the left hand bone. So go to arrow, left hand arrow, go to sockets, parent socket on the right hand side, and just search for hand underscore L, compile and save. On right hand arrow, do the same thing, but this time go to the hand underscore R socket. Now, when you're in the world, you can't see these arrows, and they're invisible. Unless you decide to make them visible, you can't see them. This arrow is kind of hidden in his hand. If I move it out, we can see it. Control Z, just put it back in place, but it is there. It's just not facing the same way. But that doesn't really matter, because if we look at this arrow, the point that we're going to take from is like this part right here, the back end of the arrow. It's not where the arrow is pointing to at the bottom, it's the origin of the arrow that we're going to use as a reference, which is this back part right there. So, you know, we don't care where the arrow is extending to, it's just where it starts, and it starts exactly on the hand. In the level, we can see it there, but if we press start, the arrows are now gone. So we can't see the arrows on his hand. We could do if we wanted to, but yeah, they're gone. That's cool. On base boss now, now we have these arrows, and in our event graph, we can drag in these arrows and say get world transform. So at any point now, we can find the position, scale, and rotation of these arrows. The only one we care about, to be honest, is the position. So we can get the position of these arrows, so we can get the position of his hand. And the arrows will move with his hand, which moves with the animation. So we can trace the trajectory of his hand, and we can constantly do sphere traces around that hand to do damage when he's swinging his hand. That's the whole idea. Now, we want to do this multiple times a second. We want to constantly repeat it over and over again. And to do that, you need a timer. Right, you need a timer which just literally repeats a function over and over again based on the time you input. So if we drag off our start and we say set timer by event, put that up here, and then inside the time I'm going to put 0.01, and I'm going to select looping, and that means whatever event is in here is going to run every 0.01 seconds and looping just means it is going to loop. If you didn't have looping, it means we would wait 0.1 seconds, fire this event once, then stop, but looping means we play it over and over again. But we don't want to play whatever this event is indefinitely, we want it to stop. We want it to stop exactly when this happens. So we need to store this as a reference and then bring that reference down here and like cancel it using that reference. The way we do that is we get this return value, we promote it to a variable. I'm going to call it right. Oh, that's not how you spell right hand trace timer handle. This is called a timer handle. A timer handle is just a reference to the timer. It's like if you make if you say spawn actor from class, and then you promote this to a variable, you know, that it's the same idea really. You're just holding a reference to the trace timer, not trace timer, to the timer. For us it's going to be a trace timer, but it doesn't always have to be. And we can get this reference next to the R stop, and we can say clear and invalidate timer by handle. Now what this means, clear and invalidate just means it's going to stop the timer. So it's, you know, it's going to stop it working. It will complete the function that it's on. It's not going to immediately stop. It will complete the function it's on, but when it's running every 0.01 seconds, right, it's so quick we don't even notice. And invalidate means this reference is now going to be null. This isn't going to store anything. So then when we create another timer, we can put that back into the variable, which is really nice. Now the custom event, what you can do is you can drag off and you can just say custom event, and here you can have a custom event and have a bunch of logic going off there, but that can get quite messy because we've got all this code in the same place, and we are going to add a couple more switches for the left hand as well. So what's a lot cleaner, and it's exactly the same thing in principle, it just looks cleaner and looks more efficient, is if we drag off this and just say create event. And now in this drop down box, we can select any function, like from wherever it is in this graph or on the side in our functions, and we can play it just from this. So underneath, I'm going to create a custom event, and I'm going to call it right hand attack trace. And then if I go back up to here in the function and I search for right hand attack trace, it's the same thing as if I'd have just plugged this function in over here, but I think it looks cleaner, and now when we expand the function to go all the way over here, it just looks a bit neater. So this function is going to do a sphere trace by channel. It is going to, the start and end location is going to be around the right hand. So we're going to get the right hand arrow. We're going to say get world location. I'm going to plug that into the start and end points. The radius, I'm going to promote this to a variable so we can quickly change it from the side panel. I'm just going to call this punch radius, and then we can put it the same size on the other hand. It's kind of like when he's punching you, it's around his hand. And we will say 150. I just took a quick look at my notes. That's the size I used in the final project, which, you know, as you know, the whole project's been completed with all the episodes for this series. So if you want to see the rest of this course and get the project files, just become a member of my Patreon. Link is in the description to that. So yeah, we've got punch radius here. Trace visibility, we're going to change this to camera, because on our BP underscore third person character, if we look, if we go to collision and we look at the character mesh, it says to ignore visibility and to block camera. This means if we have a sphere trace by channel and it goes around our player, because we've said to ignore visibility, or rather it says ignore visibility by default, you know, it's like the trace doesn't even hit it. But because it blocks camera, block just means like it's going to collide with the sphere trace, so it's actually going to work. You could set this to custom and just like invert them. There's absolutely no problem with that if you wanted to do that. But yeah, I just, you know, it's just quicker to leave this to camera. Well, not quicker now I've done my explanation, but originally it would have been quicker. On the actors to ignore, we're going to make this into an array, and I'm going to input self. You don't need to do this because there's already a pin that says to ignore self right here. But if, for example, you wanted to ignore other actors, I don't know, maybe if you had a boss, for example, that had like multiple parts to it. For example, in Lies of P, there's a boss fight where there's like 4 rabbits. It's the evil rabbit gang. There's like 4 of them. If you wanted to make sure they didn't accidentally attack each other, every time you did a trace, you could put in all of the bosses here. So you don't strictly need this for just ignoring self because there's this checkbox for that. But you know, if you want to make sure you're not accidentally hitting allies for the boss's allies, then you can put these in actors to ignore. Of the draw debug type, I'm going to promote this to a variable called draw debug type, just so I can plug this into all of our sphere traces and just change it on the side panel, and it'll change them all very quickly. I'm going to put this to for duration for now, just so we can see it in action when it starts going, but obviously in the actual game you won't have that on. Off the return value, we're going to do a branch to check if we have hit something. And then I'm going to get this out hit, I'm going to say break, and then we can get a reference to the hit actor that we've just hit. Now, I could very simply just now say apply damage of this hit actor. I could do. But can you spot a problem with that? Just think about it. We're doing this every 0.01 seconds, and you know, we're running this every 0.01 seconds, and we're applying damage if we hit something. Is there a problem? Yes, there's actually a massive problem if we just did apply damage, because we would do, you know, maybe 50 sphere traces or something around the player, and every single time we're doing damage. So we're going to damage the same player loads of times for the same one hit. And the way we're going to solve this problem is we're going to create an array of actors called damaged actors, and we can populate this array with all the hit actors, and every time we want to hit an actor, we can make sure that we haven't already hit the actor. We can make sure the actor isn't already in this damaged actors array, and then every time we do an attack, or every time the montage is completed, every time the attack's finished, we can reset that array so it's ready for the next use. Cool. So on the side, I'm going to click plus for new variable, and I'm going to call this damaged actors. Damaged actors of type actor, object reference, and I'm going to promote this to an array. Okay. And here we're going to get damaged actors, and we are going to say find. Now, if you ever try and find an actor or anything from an array and it returns -1, it means that that value isn't in the array. If it is in the array, you'll obviously get the index position of the item within the array. But if this returns -1, that's the same as saying it just isn't in the array. It couldn't be found. And that's really useful because we can just say equals equals, so exactly equal -1, check if this is equal to -1, and then do a branch. And then we're going to apply the damage and then add that actor to the array. So we'll just say apply damage, tidy up this with a reroute node. I'm just double clicking on the line if you didn't know. Double click on the line and it adds a reroute node on it. And then afterwards, we've applied some damage, and then afterwards we are going to add this to damaged actors. So we're just going to get this and we're going to say add. Cool. Because if it's the first time we've gone through this array and we haven't yet damaged the actor, if it's the first swing, or if it's the first circle of the swing that is hitting the player, the first time we're supposed to damage the player won't already be in this array. So we'll try and find it. We will hit -1 just to tell us this isn't in the array. Then we can damage the player and then add the player to the array. So next time, if we try and find the damaged actor in the array, it will be in the array and we'll get a position, we'll get the index 0 returned, and then this will be false and we won't damage them anymore. So we need to fill in the damage. Let's promote this to a variable, and let's just call this basic melee attack damage. Compile and save. I'm going to set this to 10 as a float value. Of course, you can put it to whatever you want. I've put this to a variable because then we can plug it into the left hand one very easily as well, and we can change them both at the same time. The damage causer is our self. It's the boss, so if we put in a reference to self, we can use that. That's useful because when we have event, let me just search the event. So event any damage. When we have this event, we can get the damage causer. So for example, if you wanted to check on your player who has just damaged you, you can do that with this damage causer, which is very nice. Now, of course, if you wanted a really interesting damage system, you could create your own damage system using an interface. You know, that's probably better if you wanted something really fleshed out. And now, you know, this array needs to be reset after the attack, because otherwise, after the first attack, the player will already be in this damaged actors array. So on completed of the montage, we're going to get the damaged array, and we're just going to say not reset, we're going to say clear, which is going to clear everything from the array, and it's just going to reset it, reset the array. So to recap, we're going to play a montage. So we look at the player, right? We make sure we're not dead. We set ourselves to attacking. We set our focus to the attack target. So we just look at the attack target. Then we're going to play a montage, which is a random one between these three attacks. And during the attack, if we ever get to a point where we hit the montage called our start, we're going to start this timer, which every 0.1 seconds is going to trigger a sphere trace around the boss's right hand because we know it's an R start, it's on his right hand. It's going to do the sphere trace, and if we hit the player, we're going to make sure we haven't already damaged the player on this swing. If we haven't already damaged the player, we're going to apply damage, then add that actor to a array of damaged actors to make sure we don't hit them multiple times. Then when the attack finishes, we're going to clear the array. Now, we aren't actually finished here, but that's the main concept, and the rest is kind of just doing more of what we've just done. First things first, we need to add montage notifies to the other attacks because we only did it to the first one. So let's go to base attack 2. I'm going to set the speed, the play rate to 0.75 because I think he's going quite fast. Here, as you can see, he's using his left hand, not his right. So when I find wherever I think the beginning of the attack is, which is right here, and you know, when you're doing this, you don't have to do the exact same frame. It's just kind of when you want the attack to start. I'm going to call this L start, and then L for left hand. And when he gets to the end, I'm going to say here's the end. I'm going to create another montage notify. I'm going to call it L end. L end, or did I call the other one end? L stop, and I call it stop. So I'm going to actually call this stop for consistency. It is L, so it's not actually on the same pin, but I just want to make sure they're all the same. We're going to open the third attack, and this is again the left hand. I'm going to change the play rate by clicking on the green part right here, changing the play rate to 0.75 because I like it when it goes a bit slower. And then from the start of the attack, I'm going to say here, I'm going to make it notify, call it L and L start. Make another montage notify at the end of the swing, which I'm going to say is right here. I'm going to call it L stop. L stop. Cool. So now we've got all of our animations sorted. We can go back to the base boss and just focus on the boss. We're going to need a couple more pins on our switch state. So I'm going to drag this all down just to give us a bit more space. I'm going to add 2 more pins. I'm going to call the first one L start, and I'm going to call the second one L stop. We're essentially doing the exact same thing as we did here. We just need to make a different timer because this time we want to use a separate function. So let's make that custom event. Let's make a custom event. What did I call this one? I call this right hand attack trace. So let's call this one down here left hand attack trace. That seems suitable. So left hand attack trace. Up here, we're going to, off of this, we're going to, I'm just going to duplicate, I'm going to duplicate this code down here because we want to set another timer. The event we're creating is going to be left hand attack trace, and instead of promoting it to that variable, we're going to make another variable called left hand trace timer handle. Cool. Compile and save that. Now we're storing this timer into a variable, and we can clear and invalidate that off of the else stop. So clear and invalidate, connect it to else stop, plug that there, compile, save. Now we're playing that function. We need to essentially just copy and paste this. It's the exact same logic really. We just need to change the hand that we're doing it on, because on this one we were playing, or rather we were starting this sphere trace around the right hand. So we need to get this right hand arrow, delete that, plug in left hand arrow, punch radius is fine, draw debug radius, that's fine, draw debug type, that's fine. All of this logic is okay because it's the exact same attack. Even though we're using different montages, it's still just a basic attack. So they all do the exact same thing. I'm gonna highlight all of this, press C to comment, and just call this melee attack. Show bubble when zoomed, color bubble. I'm gonna change this to a little bit of red, an angry color for an attack, and we're very nearly done. We just need to add a little bit of extra logic when we finish the attack. You just think about it. What do we need to do to finish the attack? If you remember, when we're in the in this, we can call to the attack. So now we can say melee attack. That's cool, but we need to know when this is ended, because like I said before, if we don't say finish task, we will stay in the task forever. We need to explicitly tell the state tree when we're ending the task, so when we need to move on to the next state. If we don't, we'll just stay in that state forever, which is definitely not what we want. So we need to finish the task. But if we finish the task immediately, what's going to happen is the boss is going to get to the melee attack, is going to go to this task, we're going to get to this melee attack here, we're going to go to the boss, we're going to play this function, and in a split second, before this function has even got to the attacking phase, this next finished task is going to fire, and we're going to move on to the next state. We're not even going to have a chance to have played the montage and done all this because we're instantly moving on to the next state. So we need to wait until the montage is completed to then tell the task that we're done. So I want you to think about it for a few seconds. How did we do it last time for the chase? And how can we do it now to wait until a specific signal or bing is given off that we can listen to inside the task to make sure we end the task when needed? Think about it. How can we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make another event dispatcher. I'm going to make a new event dispatcher, press this plus button, and call this melee attack. Okay, we need a new name. Melee attack finished. Melee attack finished. Compile, save, and I'm just going to drag this over, press call, connect in the clear. Cool. Compile and save that. Now in our melee attack, we can say assign on melee attack finished. You don't type assign on melee attack finished because then it just doesn't come up. Just say assign melee attack finished. And then for this event, when melee attack is finished, we can say finish task as succeeded. Very cool. Now there's a couple of very, very quick cleanup things we need to do. So right now we're only calling this uncompleted, but the animation could be interrupted. Now the animation could be interrupted when the boss has played this animation, but midway through the animation, it is trying to do something else. So it might be playing the animation, then halfway through it might want to walk to another spot, in which case it stops animation, starts walking, and then it's been interrupted. It might not always been interrupted. I mean, in this system, it probably never will be interrupted. I don't really plan on interrupting an animation, but just to be safe, just to cover all the boxes and not get unnecessary weird glitches, we're just going to plug in uninterrupted as well, just to be, really sure everything has stopped. Another thing we're going to do is after we have called this attack melee finished, we're going to do this again. So we're going to clear and invalidate the right hand trace timer handle. So I'm just going to duplicate this code over here. I'm also going to do the same with the left hand one, duplicate this over here. The reason I'm doing this is because if we've interrupted the animation, we might never get to the R stop or the L stop part. We might never clear and invalidate the timer, so it might just keep playing forever. So again, just to be really safe, we're going to make sure everything is stopped. And the final thing I would like to add on this little part of code is a little delay, because I have found, when you're in the boss fight and the boss keeps spamming attack after attack after attack instantly, it's not a good enjoyable rhythm. It's a little bit repetitive. So if we do a delay by a random time, I just think that adds a little bit to the combat. So if we do a delay, and off the duration, I'm going to say random float in range between 0 and 1. You're more than welcome to change this to 0 and 3 or 1 and 3 or whatever. Put any values in. You don't even need this. It's completely optional if you just want a small delay after your attack, but I just think it adds a little bit more to the combat. But yeah, little spelling mistake there, capital T. That's the melee attack on this side completely finished. That's all the code for our current melee attack. Obviously we'll have more attacks later. We're playing, I'm just checking personally to make sure we've done everything. I'm checking same time as you're checking. We're playing the task from the state. Yep, that goes to the task. Make sure this plays. Nice. So now if we go to the level and we click play, we go, he's going to chase us, he's running after us, and he gets to us, he's going to swing at us. As you can see, the sphere trace, we're a little bit close to the boss. We can adjust the melee distance in a second, and we will do that in a sec, so it looks a bit more realistic. But when the circle goes green, it means we've hit the player. You can see like the red dots on the screen, and that's kind of where the sphere trace is hitting, so we know we're hitting the player. We can't see the damage. We're going to do that in one of the upcoming videos, set up health for the player and for the boss. But yeah, he's going to keep doing that. He's going to keep chasing us. When he attacks us, he looks at us, he keeps rotating to look at us, right? Otherwise, we could just move to the side and he won't be looking at us. To adjust the boss, how close the boss is to the player before he starts swinging, we can go to melee range. I'm going to put this from 50 to 150. I'm going to compile and save, just so he doesn't stand as close to the player before he attacks. There's a little bit more distance. I think that looks a bit better. We could even maybe put this to 250. Let's just try 250, see if this value feels a little bit better. I just think he looked like he was standing really close to the player, to be honest. Yeah, I think that's better. He looks like he's actually hitting the player now. And he's switching between those animations nicely. And yeah, the state tree is moving. It's going very, very well. In the next video, as you know, I've already planned out all the videos. In the next video, we are going to look at how can the boss's attacks actually do damage, because right now, obviously, we're swinging at the player, but we're not actually doing damage. So we're going to quickly make some health for the player and for the boss. I say quickly because it's not very difficult and it's not a super important part of the system. I don't want to spend too much time on like a stat system. I just want to focus on state trees and these attacks. So we're not going to go super into like a really complex system. It's going to be reasonably basic for the health bar. And then look at how we can do attacks. we're going to make our own I guess attack interface. We're not just going to use the apply damage event. I mean, here we are just quickly setting it up, but from the player, when the player attacks the boss, we don't just want to send over damage. We're going to want to say, are we doing a basic attack or are we doing a heavy attack? Now, I've got some interesting stuff upcoming, and you know, we have like a really cool system where if you do enough attacks, you can do a special attack on the boss. So we have different types of attacks, and we're going to set up a custom damage system so we can send over extra information along with the applied damage. That's pretty cool. That's coming next time. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you see this as soon as the videos come out, then you'll know that the other videos are yet to come. They're yet to be uploaded. But when you're seeing this video, I've already recorded every single video in this course. They're all recorded, and the completed project files are on my Patreon, along with a couple extra bonus assets and like an actual arena to test the boss in. You'll have seen that if you watch the series introduction. So if you want to see all of the episodes immediately on the course, and if you want to get the completed project files, you sign up to my Patreon. It really helps support the channel as well. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.